up or get lost. Black woman. Sergeant Roy Harlan's hand slammed down on Maya's coffee cart so hard the paper cups jumped and scattered across the metal counter. I don't have that kind of money yet, she whispered. Harlan leaned in, his badge catching the morning light, his gaze cold. Not my problem. Maya glanced down at the small cash drawer, just a few bills from the early rush, and a roll of coins. Her hands trembled as she opened it. I just started here, officer. I paid for the permit, the inspections, everything. I can give you something today, but I don't have 300 yet. Please, just give me time. Harlan smiled as if her fear amused him. 300 every Friday. Cash. No receipt. No excuses. Please, Maya said, letting her voice break. Can I pay the rest next week? I'm not refusing. I'm just asking for time. Time, Harlan repeated, turning his head toward the street. You hear that? She thinks she gets time. No one answered. Harlan turned back to Maya. You people always show up with the same story. Rent, repairs, sick mama, dead daddy. I've heard it all. Maya's shoulders tightened at the word daddy, but she kept her eyes low. I'm just trying to work, she said. That's all? No, Harlan snapped. You're standing on my sidewalk, selling on my corner, outside my courthouse, and acting like you belong here. My papers are legal. His face changed. What did you say? Maya drew back. I have the papers, sir. If you want to see them. Harlan reached toward the side of the cart and ripped one of the laminated permit copies from its clip. He held it in front of her face. This? He said. This is what you think protects you? Maya nodded quickly. It's my vendor permit. The county office stamped it last month. Please, officer. I worked hard to get that. Harlan bent the laminated sheet in half. The plastic cracked sharply. Then he folded it again, harder, crushing it until the paper inside buckled and split. He twisted it in his fist, breaking the corners, ruining the seal, mangling the document that had taken Maya weeks of fees, inspections, and waiting rooms to obtain. Maya's eyes widened. No, please, I need that. Harlan dropped the ruined permit onto the wet pavement near his boot. There, he said. Now it looks like trash. Because that's what it is when I say it is. Maya stepped around the cart in panic and bent down to pick it up. Her hands shook as she reached for the broken plastic. Before her fingers touched it, Harlan's boot came forward. It struck her near the hip and knocked her sideways. Maya stumbled, arms flailing, and crashed against the rough bark of the old oak tree beside the courthouse walkway. A sharp edge of bark scraped along her forearm. Her shoulder hit the trunk. Her knee buckled, and she dropped to the ground, one hand scraping concrete as she tried to catch herself. For 1 second, the whole sidewalk went silent. Maya looked down and saw a thin line of blood opening along her forearm. It was not deep, but it was bright, and the sting came hot and immediate. Evelyn gasped. Lord Jesus. Harlan spun toward them, baton already in his hand. Anybody moves, I burn every one of your damn carts to the ground, he barked. No one moved. He pointed the baton at Luis's truck. You want to test me, Romero? That grill of yours looks like a fire hazard waiting to happen. Then he turned toward Evelyn's pie table. And you, old woman, don't think age makes you safe. A fire can start real easy when nobody's watching. Evelyn's face went pale. Her hand tightened over her heart. Harlan swung the baton toward Caleb. Sit down, boy. Caleb's jaw trembled. For a moment, it looked as if pride might win over fear. Then his eyes moved to Maya on the ground, to Evelyn clutching her chest, to Luis frozen beside his truck. Slowly, Caleb sat back down. Harlan looked over them with satisfaction. That's better. Everybody remembers how this street works. Maya pushed herself up on one knee, still holding her bleeding arm. She reached again for the ruined permit. Harlan brought the baton down hard across the metal edge of the coffee cart. The crack rang across the sidewalk like a gunshot. The espresso machine rattled. A full cup of hot coffee tipped over, spilling across the counter and splashing down over Maya's wrist and apron as she tried to stand. She gasped and recoiled, clutching her burned arm. Coffee soaked into the brown fabric, spreading dark across her blouse. Harlan pointed at the spill. Look at that. Public hazard. Maybe I shut you down right now. Maya's voice came out thin. "You hit the cart," he said. "No, it is whatever I say it is." Then his eyes moved to the open cash drawer. Maya saw the look before he moved. "No," she whispered. "Officer, please. That's all I have." Harlan stepped behind the side of the cart as if he owned it, reached into the drawer, and began taking everything. 20s, 10s, 5s, singles, even the small roll of quarters. He swept the money into his palm with slow, deliberate movements. Maya reached toward him from the ground. "Please, don't take it all," she begged. "That's everything I made. I need that to open tomorrow. Please just leave me something." Harlan kept emptying the drawer. Maya dragged herself closer. One hand pressed to her burned wrist, blood running in a thin line down her other arm. "Please," she cried, her voice breaking into something raw and desperate. "I'll pay you. I swear I'll pay you. Just leave me enough to open tomorrow. Please give it back. Please." Harlan looked down at her. "Begging only works if the person listening thinks you matter. And you don't." He shoved the last of her money into his pocket. Maya's hand closed around empty air. Harlan tapped the empty cash drawer with his baton. "This was me being nice. At 5 o'clock, I come back for the rest." Maya stared at him. "The rest?" she whispered. "You took everything." His voice dropped. 300 minus what I just took. You still owe me 214. If you don't have it by 5, I write you up for obstruction, sanitation, price gouging, environmental violation, and disorderly conduct. Then I tow this cart, dump your supplies, and make sure nobody in Benton County gives you another permit." Maya shook her head, tears bright in her eyes. "I didn't do anything wrong." Harlan leaned close, his breath bitter with coffee and cigarettes. "You talked back." He pointed at the broken permit, still lying near the oak tree. "And next time you wave paper in my face, make sure you understand who gets to decide whether it means anything." He stepped away, then turned back once more. "One more thing. Don't start making friends with these vendors. They already learned how this street works. You keep your head down, make coffee, and pay what you owe." Maya nodded faintly. "Yes, sir." Harlan smiled. "Good girl. Maybe you can be trained." He walked to his patrol car parked along the curb, moving slowly, letting everyone watch him leave. Before getting in, he looked back at the frozen vendors and raised his baton slightly. A final warning without words. Then he drove away. Maya remained on the pavement beside the old oak tree, burned, bleeding, broke, and holding the ruined pieces of the permit she had worked so hard to earn. No one breathed normally until the patrol car disappeared around the corner, and beneath Maya's coffee-soaked apron, a tiny red light kept blinking. For several seconds after Sergeant Harlan's patrol car disappeared around the corner, nobody moved. The street outside Benton County Courthouse seemed to hold its breath. A bus sighed at the curb. A flag snapped above the courthouse steps. Somewhere behind the stone walls, a bailiff called a case number, and the work of justice went on as if a young woman had not just been thrown against an oak tree, burned by her own coffee, robbed of her morning's earnings, and left bleeding on the sidewalk beneath the words, "Equal justice under law." Maya Williams stayed where she was, one knee on the pavement, one hand pressed to her burned wrist, the other curled around the broken pieces of her vendor permit. The ruined laminate bit into her palm. Her forearm throbbed where the bark had scraped it open. Coffee had soaked through her apron and blouse, cooling now into a sticky stain against her skin. She heard footsteps approach, slow and careful, the way people walk toward danger after the danger has turned the corner but has not truly gone. Evelyn Carter reached her first. The older woman knelt with effort, her gray cardigan brushing the pavement. "Baby girl," she whispered. "Let me see that arm." Maya shook her head too quickly. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Evelyn took a napkin from her apron pocket, folded it twice, and pressed it gently against the bleeding scrape. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "You don't have to lie to me. I've been alive too long to believe fine when I see blood." Luis Romero stood a few feet away, face drawn tight with shame. He had stepped down from his sandwich truck now, but not far. His eyes kept flicking to the end of the street where Harlan had vanished. "Miss Maya, I'm sorry," he said. "I wanted to help." Maya looked at him. He was a big man, with work-worn hands and kind eyes, but right then, he looked smaller than his own shadow. "He threatened your truck," she said softly. Louise swallowed. "That truck feeds my wife, my daughter, my grandbabies. He knows that. He always knows what a man is afraid to lose." Caleb Brooks remained by his shoeshine stand, brush hanging from his fingers. He was young, but his eyes carried the tired watchfulness of someone who had learned early not to mistake a badge for safety. "You need to leave before 5, he said. He meant what he said. Maya tried to stand. Pain shot through her hip where Harlan's boot had knocked her sideways. Evelyn caught her elbow. "Easy now," Evelyn murmured. "I have to clean this up," Maya said. "No, you have to breathe." But Maya was already reaching for the spilled cups, the scattered lids, the coffee running in a dark line along the concrete. The cash drawer hung open behind the register, empty as a mouth after a scream. Seeing it hurt worse than the burn. She let herself stare at it for 1 second, long enough for anyone watching to believe she was thinking of rent, supplies, and tomorrow morning's milk order. If you feel this, hit like, and drop where you're watching from in the comments because you're not the only one watching this right now. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because what happens next will change everything. That was what Maya needed them to believe. Evelyn followed her gaze and shook her head. "He takes from folks who got the least and calls it keeping order. Does he do this every week?" Maya asked. Louise looked at Caleb. Caleb looked away. Evelyn answered because age had made her brave in small, careful ways. "Every Friday. Sometimes Monday too, if he's angry. Sometimes he don't even need money. Sometimes he just wants to remind us who can hurt us." Maya folded the ruined permit and slipped it into her apron pocket. "Has anyone reported him?" A bitter little laugh escaped Caleb. "Reported him to who? His friends? His boss? The folks in that building who drink coffee and pretend they don't know where the money goes?" Evelyn gave him a warning glance. "Caleb." "No, Miss Evelyn," Caleb said, voice low but shaking. "She needs to know. Harlan don't run alone. Man like that never does. Somebody signs those fake citations. Somebody cancels those complaints. Somebody tells him when people talk." Maya lowered her eyes, but every word sank into place. Patterns. Chain of command. Possible corruption above Harlan. Witness intimidation. Civil rights violations. Retaliation against minority vendors. The street had just given her more in 5 minutes than 3 weeks of quiet observation. Luis wiped his hands on his apron. "You got family nearby?" "No," Maya said. "Just me." That answer softened Evelyn's face. "Then you listen to me. Pack what you can. Go home. Come back when you have somebody with you. Or don't come back at all. A young woman alone don't need to be proving anything to a man like Harlan." Maya looked toward the courthouse doors. "Maybe somebody should." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion yet, but with worry. "Courage is a holy thing, baby, but it can get foolish when it's hungry." Maya gave her a faint smile. "My father used to say something like that." "What happened to him?" The question hit closer than Maya expected. She saw, for a flash, Marcus Williams sitting at an old kitchen table in Atlanta, staring at an apology letter that had arrived 7 years too late. She heard his cough, dry and tired. She remembered how carefully he folded the letter before putting it back in the envelope, as if even pain deserved manners. "The system happened to him," she said. Evelyn did not ask more. Older people knew when a wound had a door on it. By noon, the rush had faded. Maya served what coffee she could with one good hand. A court clerk bought a muffin and would not meet her eyes. A public defender quietly left a $20 bill in the tip jar, then walked away before she could thank him. Evelyn brought burn cream from her pie table's first aid tin. Luis gave her a clean towel. Caleb, without a word, retrieved the last piece of her broken permit from near the oak tree and set it beside her register like evidence. At 12:43 p.m., Maya closed the cart early. She pushed it 3 blocks to a rented storage garage behind a closed laundromat, moving slowly so the pain looked worse than it was, and because some of it truly was. Only after the metal door rolled down behind her did her breathing change. The frightened coffee girl faded from her face, replaced by a stillness colder and sharper than anger. She reached beneath the soaked seam of her apron and removed the recording device. The tiny red light blinked once against her palm. "Still running," she whispered. From under a false panel near the cart's water tank, she pulled a second device, then a third hidden inside an empty sugar canister. Harlan had not found any of them. He had been too certain of his power to look for proof. Maya changed clothes in the storage unit, cleaned the blood from her arm, wrapped the burn, and placed the ruined permit, the stained apron, and the empty cash drawer into separate evidence bags. Then she drove a borrowed gray sedan across town to a furnished apartment leased under the name Mia Walker. Inside, nothing about the place looked like home. There were no family photos on the walls, no decorative pillows, no half-read novels beside the couch. A folding table held a laptop, encrypted drives, a printer, a map of Benton County Courthouse, and a caseboard covered in names: Roy Harlan, Marvin Ellis, Grant Miller, Sean Dwyer, Licensing Office, Environmental Services, Unknown Federal Leak. Maya sat down carefully and connected the recorder. The first words filled the room. "Pay up, or get lost, black woman." She did not flinch this time. The file uploaded into a secure folder labeled Operation Courthouse Shadow DOJ, Civil Rights Division, FBI Joint Task Support. Maya entered timestamps, location markers, witness positions, injuries, property damage, extortion demand, racial language, and threat of arson against vendors. Her burned wrist pulsed with every keystroke, but she kept typing. At 2:08 p.m., a secure call opened on the laptop. Agent Thomas Reed appeared on screen, his gray hair neatly trimmed, his tie loosened, his face changing the moment he saw the bandage on her arm. "Maya," he said. "What happened?" She played the first 40 seconds. Then the baton strike. Then Harlan threatening to burn the carts. Reed's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. When the recording ended, Maya said, "He took all the cash and gave me until 5 for the rest." Reed leaned back slowly. "You need medical attention. I need surveillance on that street before 5. You were assaulted. I was assaulted by a target in an active federal civil rights investigation while he committed extortion, property destruction, theft, witness intimidation, and threatened arson in front of multiple minority-owned businesses." Maya's voice stayed calm. "That is not just an injury. That is a pattern getting louder." Reed studied her. "And your cover? Intact. He thinks I'm scared. You are scared." Maya looked at the frozen image of Harlan on her screen. His baton raised, his mouth open mid-threat. "Good," she said. "Then I know. I'm still human." Reed was silent for a moment. This started because vendors sent anonymous complaints. They were too afraid to sign their names. Today explains why. "Then we protect them before he makes an example out of someone else." Reed nodded once. "Upload everything. I'll notify the FBI team in Atlanta. No moves without coordination." Maya's eyes went to the caseboard, to the blank space above Harlan's name, where his connections still waited to be proven. He mentioned licensing, environmental services, and reports that can say whatever he wants. "Caleb thinks someone higher is helping him. So do I," Reed said. "And Maya?" "Yes? Do not go back there alone at 5. Maya looked at the empty cash drawer sealed in plastic, at the broken permit, at the stain drying on her brown apron. Then she looked back at Reed. "If I don't show up," she said, "Harlan will punish them for what he did to me." Reed's expression hardened. "Then we make sure when he comes back, he gives us more than fear." Maya ended the call and turned once more to the recording. Outside her apartment window, the afternoon sun burned white over Benton County, and somewhere near the courthouse, vendors were counting the minutes until 5 o'clock. Maya pressed play again, listening to Harlan's voice fill the room. This time, she was not listening as a victim. She was listening as the federal case against him began to breathe. By 4:15 that afternoon, the sidewalk outside Benton County Courthouse had changed its breathing. People still passed through the side entrance. Lawyers still balanced leather briefcases and paper coffee cups. Court clerks still hurried down the steps with phones pressed to their ears. talking about filings, continuances, and lunch orders. But the vendors along the curb were not moving like people doing business anymore. They were moving like people preparing for weather. Luis Romero wiped the same clean spot on his sandwich counter until the metal shone. Caleb Brooks polished a pair of brown dress shoes for a man who had already gone inside 20 minutes earlier. Evelyn Carter packed and unpacked her pie boxes, arranging apple, pecan, and sweet potato slices by habit rather than thought. Every few seconds, someone looked toward the corner where Sergeant Harlan's patrol car had disappeared that morning. Maya Williams returned at 4:32. She pushed her coffee cart slowly back into place beside the old oak tree. One hand wrapped in a clean bandage, her forearm hidden beneath a long sleeve. The brown apron had been replaced with another one, nearly identical, though anyone close enough could see she moved carefully around the hip that had struck the tree. The ruined permit was gone from the front clip. In its place hung a fresh copy, laminated, county-stamped, official. Harlan had destroyed one piece of paper. The Department of Justice had scanned 6 more before Maya ever rolled the cart onto that street. Luis saw her first. His face fell. "Miss Maya," he called softly, stepping down from his truck. No, you should not be here." Maya locked the cart wheels. "I have coffee to sell. You have trouble coming." "I know." Caleb stood from his shoe-shine stool, anger and fear fighting across his face. "You're making it worse." Maya turned to him. "For who?" "For all of us," he snapped, then immediately looked ashamed of how harsh it sounded. He lowered his voice. "You don't understand. Harlan, don't let people embarrass him. Not in front of the courthouse. Not in front of us." Evelyn approached with her cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. Though the afternoon had warmed, her eyes went straight to Maya's bandaged wrist. "Baby girl," she said, "some lessons don't need repeating." Maya gave her a small, tired smile. "My father used to say a lesson that hurts is the one people remember." Evelyn's expression softened, but only for a moment. "And where is your father now?" Maya looked toward the courthouse steps. "Gone." That one word settled among them. It said enough. For a while, they did not speak. The street noise filled the space between them. Tires on pavement, a bus door sighing open, the faint echo of voices from the courthouse hallway. Whenever the side entrance swung wide, Maya began preparing the cart. She checked the water tank, wiped the counter, lined up cups, set out sugar packets, and wrote the day's last special on the chalkboard with her left hand because her right wrist still stung. BlackCoffee, $2. It was such an ordinary thing to write in a place that had become so dangerous. Luis glanced up and down the street. "He took all your money this morning." Maya nodded. "So how you buying supplies tomorrow?" "I'll figure it out." Caleb gave a bitter laugh. "That's what broke people say before the lights get cut off." Maya looked at him, not offended. "You sound like you've said it before." Caleb's jaw tightened. He sat back down slowly, rubbing a cloth over a shoe that did not need polishing. "My mama said it every winter. Power company don't care if your kid has homework. Landlord don't care if your check comes Friday. Harlan don't care if your cash box is empty. People who want money never ask what it cost you to earn it." Evelyn nodded. "That's the truth." Maya watched the 3 of them. They were not just side characters in a federal file. They were morning routines, rent envelopes, grandchildren's birthdays, doctor's bills, old songs playing from small radios, hands tired from work that never made anybody rich. The investigation had started with anonymous complaints, but now those complaints had faces. That made the job harder. It also made it more important. "What happens if someone doesn't pay?" Maya asked. Luis looked toward the courthouse, then lowered his voice. "Depends who it is. Me. He sends health inspection. Last year they said my refrigerator was running 3 degrees too warm. 3 degrees. Cost me $400 in spoiled meat and a fine," Caleb said. "He wrote me up for loitering at my own stand." Evelyn folded her hands over her stomach. "My nephew came to help me one summer. Harlan said he looked like a boy who might have warrants. Put him against the wall in front of customers. He was 19. Never came back after that." Maya's fingers paused over the coffee lids. "Did any of you report those incidents?" Caleb looked at her as if she had asked whether they had tried praying to the moon. Lady, you really are new. Luis shook his head. Reports go missing. Complaints get marked unfounded. Then Harlan knows who talked. Evelyn stepped closer. There were letters. Maya looked at her. What kind of letters? Evelyn's eyes moved to Luis, then Caleb. Something unspoken passed between them. Anonymous, Luis said at last. To the court administrator, to the county commission, later maybe to Atlanta. Nobody signed real names. Why not? Maya asked, though she already knew. Caleb's mouth twisted. Because men like Harlan don't read complaints. They read names. Maya let the sentence hang. She heard it not only as fear, but as testimony. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside was a small brass key. She pressed it into Maya's palm. What's this? Maya asked. Storage room behind my pie table. There's a coffee can on the second shelf. Folks put copies in there. Citations, letters, pictures, whatever they were brave enough to save, and too scared to keep at home. Luis looked worried. Miss Evelyn. I'm old, Luis, Evelyn said, without looking at him. Not dead. I know the difference between danger and opportunity. Maya closed her fingers around the key. Why give this to me? Evelyn studied her face. Because this morning, Harlan hurt you and you came back. That's either foolish or meaningful. I'm praying it's meaningful. Before Maya could answer, Caleb stood abruptly. Patrol car. The street went still. Harlan's cruiser turned onto the block at 4:57, 3 minutes early. It rolled slowly along the curb, the way a shark circles shallow water. Officer Grant Miller sat in the passenger seat, younger, broad-faced, chewing gum with his window down. Behind them, another patrol car pulled in near the courthouse steps. Officer Sean Dwyer stepped out, sunglasses on though the sun had dropped low behind the buildings. Harlan parked beside Maya's cart. Nobody moved. He got out, adjusting his belt. His eyes went first to the fresh permit clipped to the cart, then to Maya's bandaged wrist, then to her face. Well, he said, look who didn't learn. Maya lowered her eyes. Officer Harlan. He glanced at the empty tip jar, the small stack of cups, the chalkboard special. Where's my money? I don't have it. The air changed. Even the traffic seemed to thin. Harlan stepped closer. You had all afternoon. You took everything I had this morning. Miller snorted from the patrol car. Harlan smiled faintly. That sounds like poor planning. Maya kept her voice small. I can pay next Friday. More than 300. I just need time. Harlan turned toward the other vendors. Hear that? More time. Then his face hardened. Maybe I was unclear. He reached for the fresh permit clipped to the cart. Maya moved without thinking, one hand lifting slightly. Please don't. Harlan froze, his eyes fixed on her hand. You stopping me? Maya dropped her hand. No, sir. He ripped the fresh permit loose anyway and held it up. How many of these you got, coffee girl? Maya said nothing. Harlan leaned in, voice low enough that only she and the hidden recorder could catch every word. You think paperwork saves you? You think a clean little permit makes you respectable? I can make a whore look like a saint on paper and a saint look like a criminal. That's the beautiful thing about reports. They say what men like me need them to say. Maya's heartbeat thudded once, hard. Her fear was real now, but so was the discipline beneath it. Harlan tapped the permit against her cheek. At 5 o'clock, I expected $214. You have nothing. So here's what happens next. Tomorrow morning, licensing comes. Environmental services comes. Health department comes. By noon, this cart is a public nuisance. By Friday, it is gone. And if any of your little friends here sign anything, say anything, or help you move one cup, I start with Romero's truck and work my way down the block. Luis stared at the ground. Evelyn's lips moved in silent prayer. Caleb's fists clenched at his sides. Maya whispered, Please don't punish them. Harlan smiled. Then stop giving me reasons. He folded the second permit once, slowly, but did not break it. Instead, he slid it into his own pocket. I'll keep this for review. Maya looked at the pocket, then back at him. That's my legal permit. Harlan's gaze sharpened. You really do have a problem learning, don't you? He stepped close, so close she could smell tobacco and mint gum. Tomorrow, you're going to tell every vendor on this block that you made a mistake. You're going to tell them Sergeant Harlan treated you fairly. You're going to tell them anybody thinking of complaining better remember what fire does to food trucks. Maya's throat tightened. And if I don't, Harlan's smile disappeared. Then I stop treating you like a confused little girl and start treating you like a criminal. He turned away, then paused beside Evelyn's pie table. He picked up a small apple pie, sniffed it, and dropped it back onto the table upside down. Careful with that oven, Miss Carter, he said. Old wiring causes accidents. Evelyn did not answer. Harlan and Miller returned to the cruiser. Dwyer watched the vendors a moment longer, then got into the second patrol car. Both vehicles pulled away slowly, leaving the block in a silence so heavy it felt nailed down. Maya stood behind her cart, breathing through the anger burning in her chest. Caleb spoke first. You see now? Luis removed his cap and wiped his forehead. He won't stop. Evelyn looked at Maya with tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. No, he won't. Not unless somebody makes him. Maya opened her hand and looked at the brass key Evelyn had given her. For the first time that day, she did not have to pretend her hands were shaking. They truly were. But inside her apron, the recorder had captured Harlan's second visit, his threats, his admission about falsifying reports, and the name of every agency he planned to weaponize by morning. Maya looked down the street after the departing patrol cars. Then she closed her fist around the key. Tomorrow, Harlan would send inspectors to destroy her coffee cart. But before sunrise, Maya Williams would open the coffee can full of secrets he thought fear had buried. Maya waited until the courthouse lights thinned and the evening traffic softened into the slow hum of a southern town, pretending it had nothing to hide. At 6:18 p.m., the last public defender hurried down the courthouse steps with a stack of folders tucked under one arm. A janitor rolled a trash bin through the side entrance. Across the street, a church marquee flickered under the coming dusk. The words, Sunday Service 9 a.m., glowing in tired white letters. The vendors had closed one by one, not with their usual end-of-day chatter, but in silence, each of them folding away a piece of themselves before the dark came. Luis drove his sandwich truck off the block first, headlights low, shoulders hunched over the wheel. Caleb locked his shoeshine box and carried it under one arm, his eyes sweeping the sidewalk as if Harlan might step out from behind any parked car. Evelyn was the last to leave. She wrapped her pies in cloth, turned off the small warming lamp, and looked once toward Maya. You got that key safe? She asked. Maya nodded. I do. Evelyn hesitated, then came closer. If you open that door, baby, you don't get to unknow what you find. Maya's fingers closed around the brass key in her coat pocket. I learned that a long time ago. Evelyn studied her face in the fading light. For a moment, the old woman looked as if she wanted to ask who Maya really was. Instead, she only said, Then be careful with our ghosts. After Evelyn left, Maya waited another 10 minutes. Then she pushed her coffee cart into the rented storage garage and crossed back toward Evelyn's pie stand. The courthouse loomed behind her, pale and still, its columns washed in security lights. A camera above the side entrance turned slowly from left to right. Maya did not look at it directly. She moved like a tired vendor cleaning up after a long day. Shoulders low, steps measured, head down. The storage room behind Evelyn's stand was narrow and smelled of flour, sugar, cardboard, and old wood. Maya unlocked the door, slipped inside, and pulled it closed behind her. For a moment, she stood in the dark and listened. Nothing but the dull throb of traffic 2 blocks away and the hum of a vending machine somewhere near the courthouse wall. She turned on the small flashlight clipped to her keyring. The second shelf held paper plates, napkins, aluminum pie tins, a first aid box, and an old coffee can with a faded label. The kind people used to keep buttons in, or loose change, or things too small for a drawer and too important to throw away. Maya took it down. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them. Some folded neatly, some bent and stained, some sealed with tape, some written in careful block letters by hands that did not trust cursive to disguise enough. No full names, but initials, dates, business descriptions, copies of citations, photographs, receipts, and handwritten accounts of what Harlan had done. She read the first one, standing up. March 3. Officer Harlan demanded $250 from LR after lunch service. Said health inspection would come if payment late. Health inspection came next morning. Fine issued for refrigerator temperature. Thermometer later tested normal. Maya's jaw tightened. Luis. She read another. May 19. C. B. Was told shoeshine stand created pedestrian obstruction. Paid $180 cash. Citation disappeared. Caleb. Another. August 7. E. C. Short on payment because of medicine. Officer Harlan said old women should not make promises their hearts could not keep. Maya lowered the paper. The room seemed smaller suddenly. She read more. A flower seller whose niece had been stopped 3 times in 1 week after she refused to pay. A man selling newspapers who lost his permit after asking for a receipt. A mother who said Harlan warned her not to testify in her son's excessive force complaint. A parking attendant who wrote that Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis once stood beside Harlan during a collection and looked away while money changed hands. At the bottom of the can was a flash drive taped inside a church bulletin. Maya removed it, placed everything back exactly as she had found it, and locked the room. She did not return to her apartment immediately. Instead, she drove the gray sedan through quiet neighborhoods where porch lights glowed and older couples sat in rockers watching the evening news through open windows. She passed a Little League field, a diner with a hand-painted sign, a VFW hall with a flag folded behind glass. Benton County looked peaceful from a moving car. That was the trouble with places like this. They knew how to look innocent from the road. At 7:42 p.m., Maya entered her apartment under the name Mia Walker and laid the contents of the coffee can across the folding table. She scanned every page. She photographed every crease. She logged initials, dates, agencies involved, amounts demanded, threats made, retaliatory citations, and possible witnesses. The pattern was no longer hidden. It was sitting in front of her in the handwriting of frightened people who had tried, in the only way they could, to tell the truth without offering their throats. At 8:16, Agent Thomas Reed appeared on the secure call. Maya did not greet him. She held one page up to the camera. They've been documenting him for years. Reed leaned closer. Where did you get that? Evelyn Carter. Storage room behind her pie stand. The vendors kept copies in a coffee can. Reed's expression changed. Not with surprise, but with the grim recognition of a man who had spent too many years learning that poor people often keep better records than institutions. How many? Enough to show a pattern. Harlan, Miller, Dwyer, licensing, environmental services, health inspections, and at least 2 references to Deputy Chief Ellis. Reed was quiet for a moment. That moves this beyond street-level extortion. It was never just street-level, Maya said. He weaponized every office that could make a small business disappear. Reed looked down at something off-screen, likely notes, likely a timeline. There's more. The anonymous complaints triggered a preliminary hearing. It was already being scheduled, but after today, DOJ wants it accelerated. The county thinks it's a local administrative matter. We know better. Maya understood before he finished. You want me there? We need someone who can stand as a complainant without exposing the others. The vendors are too afraid to sign sworn statements. If they show their faces too soon, Harlan retaliates before we can lock the chain. Maya looked at the pages spread before her. Luis's refrigerator, Caleb's obstruction citation, Evelyn's medicine money. The mother warned not to testify, so I represent them. As Maya Williams, coffee vendor, Reed said. Not as an agent. Not yet. Maya leaned back slowly. Her burned wrist pulled against the bandage. The moment I walk into that courtroom, Harlan will know someone finally stopped whispering. That's why it has to be you. They can't show their faces. You can. Maya's eyes drifted to a small photograph taped to the side of her caseboard. Marcus Williams stood in a faded denim jacket beside an old pickup truck, one hand on the open hood, smiling at whoever had taken the picture. Her father had looked younger then, before the accusation. Before the unpaid suspension. Before neighbors stopped waving because guilt, even false guilt, made people uncomfortable. Before the apology letter came stamped with the city seal and arrived after his heart had already given up fighting. I don't know if I'm standing up for them, Maya said quietly, or for the apology my father never lived to hear. Reed's voice softened. Pain can sharpen you, Maya, but if you let it drive, it will blind you. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she was not an undercover agent, not a federal witness, not a coffee girl with a hidden recorder. She was a daughter standing in a kitchen, watching her father fold an apology letter like it weighed more than the Bible. Then Evelyn's voice came back to her. Be careful with our ghosts. Maya opened her eyes. I'll do it, she said. Reed nodded once, though worry remained in his face. Then tomorrow you stay calm no matter what Harlan does. If he lies, let him lie. If he threatens, let him threaten. If he tries to make you look unstable, you give him nothing he can use. Maya looked at Harlan's name on the caseboard. He's going to come after me. Yes, Reed said. And when he does, we record everything. The call ended near 9. Maya stayed at the table, sorting the anonymous complaints into piles. Extortion, retaliation, racial intimidation, witness threats, false licensing actions, environmental violations used as punishment. Each stack grew. Near midnight, she wrote one sentence at the top of her hearing notes. Fear is not silence. It is testimony waiting for protection. The next morning, Maya returned to the courthouse block before sunrise. Evelyn was already there, rolling dough beneath the warm yellow light of her stand. Maya handed the brass key back. Evelyn searched her face. You opened it. I did. And Maya looked down the quiet street where Harlan would soon return. You were right, she said. Those weren't just papers. Evelyn wiped flour from her hands. No, they were pieces of people. Maya nodded. Then I'll carry them carefully. Evelyn's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. If you ever stand in that courtroom, don't stand there alone. Stand there with all of us behind you. Maya looked at the courthouse doors, then at the old woman who had guarded a coffee can full of secrets because nobody else had guarded them. I will, Maya said, and by noon, Sergeant Roy Harlan would learn that the young black coffee vendor he robbed, kicked, burned, and left bleeding had been placed on the hearing schedule as the public face of every anonymous complaint he thought fear had buried. Sergeant Roy Harlan learned about the hearing before Maya finished serving her first cup of coffee. At 8:07 that morning, a courthouse clerk with nervous hands carried a sealed notice from the administrative office to the police liaison desk. At 8:19, Officer Sean Dwyer saw the subject line and stepped into the hallway with his phone. At 8:26, Harlan was sitting in his patrol car behind the courthouse, reading the message twice while his jaw tightened hard enough to make the muscle jump. Administrative hearing advanced. Vendor complaints. Representative complainant. Maya Williams. Coffee cart. South side entrance. For a moment, Harlan said nothing. Officer Grant Miller sat in the passenger seat, chewing gum slowly, waiting for the explosion. It came quietly, which was worse. That little girl thinks she can walk into my courthouse and speak for them. Miller glanced through the windshield toward the side entrance. You want me to talk to her? No. Harlan folded the notice and slid it into his shirt pocket. Talking is what got her brave. We're going to make her sorry. By 9, Harlan was in Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis's office on the second floor of the Benton County Police Annex, a squat brick building 2 blocks from the courthouse. Ellis was 56, silver-haired, clean-shaven, the kind of man who kept framed community awards on the wall and bourbon in the bottom drawer. On his desk sat a photograph of him shaking hands with a state senator at a law enforcement breakfast. Beside it was a Bible that looked opened only when visitors came in. Ellis read the hearing notice without changing expression. She's the one from the coffee cart? Harlan stood near the window, arms crossed. The one who forgot her place. Ellis set the paper down. Anonymous complaints are one thing. A face in a hearing is another. She doesn't know anything. She knows enough to show up. Ellis looked over the top of his reading glasses. And if she shows up as the face of those complaints, reporters may start asking why vendors were too scared to sign their names. Harlan's eyes hardened. Then we make her the story, before she gets to tell one. Ellis leaned back. What do we have? Harlan smiled then, slow and mean. By tomorrow, plenty. The first report was written before lunch. Officer Miller filed a public obstruction complaint, stating that Maya's coffee cart blocked wheelchair access near the courthouse side entrance. Though the sidewalk was wide enough for 3 people to pass side by side, Dwyer filed a disorderly conduct note, claiming Maya had raised her voice aggressively during a routine compliance check. A licensing clerk, named Paula Denton, who had learned years ago that saying no to Harlan created problems for her mortgage, backdated a notice questioning whether Maya's cart location was properly approved. By early afternoon, Environmental Services had received an anonymous complaint about wastewater runoff, plastic cup litter, and improper disposal of dairy products. At 2:12 p.m., Harlan walked to Maya's cart holding a black folder. Maya saw him coming and felt the street change around her. Luis stopped chopping onions inside his truck. Caleb lowered his shoeshine brush. Evelyn turned one pie box slowly in her hands, though it was already straight. Maya kept pouring coffee. Officer Harlan, she said. He placed the folder on her counter. Busy day for you. She looked at the folder but did not touch it. I'm just working. That's not what I hear. He opened it and spread the papers with 2 fingers. Price gouging complaint. Public obstruction. Environmental hazard. Disorderly conduct. Questionable permit. That's a lot for a girl who just sells coffee. Maya let her face tighten with fear. I haven't done any of that. Harlan's smile did not reach his eyes. That's the funny thing about paperwork. It doesn't care what you did. It only cares what gets written down. Her hand shook as she reached for a cup lid. Why are you doing this? Me? He touched his chest in mock surprise. I'm protecting the courthouse. People come here for justice. They shouldn't have to step over your trash and listen to you stir up resentment against law enforcement. I never stirred up anything. Harlan leaned closer. Then why are vendors suddenly whispering about hearings? Maya lowered her eyes. There it is, he said softly. You thought I wouldn't hear. I don't know what you mean. You know exactly what I mean. Those old fools have been crying on paper for years, but they never had the guts to show their faces. Then you roll in here with your little cart, your sad eyes, your legal papers, and suddenly everybody thinks they can stand up. Maya's throat moved. Maybe they just want to be left alone. Harlan stared at her. No one is left alone. Not in my district. The words were quiet, but the recorder sewn beneath the counter caught every syllable. A man in a brown suit approached the cart, saw Harlan, and immediately changed direction. Harlan noticed and smiled. See that? You're bad for business. Maya whispered. You're scaring customers away. No, I'm documenting a public nuisance. He took a pen from his shirt pocket and wrote something on one of the forms. Maya watched his hand move. He was creating the lie in front of her, bold as daylight. You can't just make things up, she said. Harlan stopped writing. Maya knew at once she had pushed the line too far, but the line needed pushing. He looked up slowly. What did you say? She let panic rise into her voice. I mean, please, officer, I'm not trying to cause trouble. You already caused trouble. He tapped the folder. You want to walk into that hearing? Fine, but understand what you'll be when you get there. Not a victim, not some brave little businesswoman. You'll be a dishonest vendor with complaints against her. A race-baiting loudmouth who turned hard-working people against the police because she didn't want to follow rules. Maya's eyes filled. She made herself look smaller. That isn't true. It will be when I'm done. From Evelyn's table, a soft sound escaped. Half prayer, half protest. Harlan turned toward her. You got something to add, Miss Carter. Evelyn's hand went to her chest. No, Sergeant. That's what I thought. He looked at Luis next. Romero, you still got that old propane line under your grill? Luis froze. Harlan smiled. Would hate for an inspector to call it unsafe. Luis dropped his eyes. Yes, sir, Caleb muttered. Damn. Harlan's head snapped toward him. What was that? Caleb stood very still. Nothing. Good. Because your permit to occupy that sidewalk is a courtesy, not a right. Maya felt the whole block shrink under his voice. This was how he ruled them, not only by hurting one person, but by making everyone else imagine their own turn. Harlan gathered the papers back into the folder and tucked it under his arm. "The hearing is tomorrow at 10, he said to Maya. "Room 2B. You show up, I bury you. You don't show up, I bury them." He nodded toward the vendors. Maya looked at him then, and for half a second, she forgot to look afraid. Harlan saw it. His eyes narrowed. "You know what bothers me about you?" he asked. Maya lowered her gaze quickly. "No, officer. You act scared, but your eyes don't." She said nothing. He stepped close enough that she could smell tobacco on his breath. "Tired people look down because life beat them," he said. "You look down because you're counting things." Maya's fingers tightened around a coffee sleeve. Harlan smiled again, but now suspicion lived inside it. "I'll see you in court, coffee girl." He walked away with the folder under his arm, stopping only long enough to flip the sign on Caleb's shoeshine stand from open to closed with one finger. Then he crossed the street to his patrol car and drove off, leaving behind the familiar silence. Luis was the first to speak. "Miss Maya, don't go tomorrow." Caleb shook his head. "If you go, he'll tear you apart in front of everybody." Evelyn looked at Maya with sad, knowing eyes. "And if she doesn't, he'll tear us apart one at a time." Maya wiped the counter where Harlan's folder had rested. Her wrist still hurt, her arm still stung, and now every agency Harlan had named was being sharpened like a knife against her. But beneath the cart, the recorder had captured him again. The fake reports, the threats, the hearing, the promise to bury her, the admission that paperwork could become whatever he needed it to be. Maya poured a cup of black coffee and set it aside untouched. Tomorrow, Harlan planned to walk into room 2B with a folder full of lies. But Maya Williams would walk in carrying the truth he had been foolish enough to say out loud. Room 2B sat on the second floor of Benton County Courthouse, behind a pair of heavy wooden doors that had been polished by decades of nervous hands. At 9:42 the next morning, Maya Williams stood in the hallway outside those doors wearing a plain navy dress, low black heels, and a light gray coat that covered the bandage on her wrist. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her face was calm in the way people call calm when they do not know how much it costs. To anyone passing by, she looked like a young coffee vendor who had tried to dress respectfully for a hearing she did not fully understand. That was the point. Inside the courthouse, everything smelled of lemon polish, old paper, and cooled coffee. The walls held framed portraits of judges, most of them white men, all of them looking down with the solemn confidence of people whose names had been protected by institutions. A bailiff walked past Maya without slowing. A clerk shuffled files at a side desk. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried and a tired mother whispered, "Hush now, baby. We almost done." Maya looked toward the tall window at the end of the corridor. Through it, she could see the street below. Evelyn's pie table was closed for the morning. Luis's sandwich truck sat locked near the curb. Caleb's shoeshine chair was empty. They were not outside today. They were inside, gathered behind her, because for the first time in years, their fear had an appointment with the law. Evelyn Carter sat on the bench nearest the wall, wearing her Sunday coat and a small pearl pin shaped like a dove. Her hands rested over her purse, but her knuckles were tight. Luis Romero sat beside his wife, Rosa, who held a rosary half hidden in her palm. Caleb Brooks stood rather than sat, back to the wall, eyes moving from door to door like a man still deciding whether to run. Maya crossed to them. "You don't have to stay," she said quietly. Evelyn looked up. "Baby, I didn't put those papers in a coffee can for decoration." Luis tried to smile, but it failed halfway. "We stay. We just may not breathe too good." Caleb leaned closer. "If this goes bad, Harlan won't wait till tomorrow." Maya held his gaze. "Then today has to matter." The doors opened at 9:58. A clerk called them in. Room 2B was smaller than a full courtroom, but it carried the same weight. Dark wood benches, county seal on the wall, an American flag in the corner, a raised desk where hearing officer Margaret Whitcomb sat reviewing files through thin reading glasses. She was in her early 60s, white-haired, severe but not unkind, the kind of woman who had likely spent her life being underestimated and had stopped forgiving it long ago. Maya took her seat near the front table assigned to the complainant representative. The vendors sat 2 rows behind her, Evelyn directly behind Maya, Luis and Rosa to the right, Caleb near the aisle. At 10:03, Sergeant Roy Harlan entered. He wore his dress uniform. The brass was polished, the shoes shone. The badge sat bright against his chest. Officer Grant Miller followed carrying a folder. Officer Sean Dwyer came behind him, chin lifted, expression bored. Then Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis entered in a dark suit, silver hair combed back, face arranged into public concern. He shook one clerk's hand, nodded to the hearing officer, and sat behind Harlan like a father watching a son perform. Harlan's eyes found Maya. He smiled. It was not large. It did not need to be. Hearing Officer Whitcomb called the matter to order. This is an administrative hearing regarding anonymous vendor complaints involving alleged misconduct, retaliatory enforcement, and licensing irregularities around Benton County Courthouse. Because the complainants have requested anonymity due to fear of retaliation, Miss Maya Williams will appear today as a representative vendor and affected party. This is not a criminal proceeding. However, all testimony will be recorded. Harlan's smile thinned for half a second at the word recorded. Then he relaxed. He thought recordings belonged to the courthouse. He did not know about the device sewn inside Maya's coat lining. He did not know about the FBI technician sitting in the back row disguised as a courthouse maintenance supervisor. He did not know Agent Thomas Reed was listening from an unmarked room across the street. He did not know that when powerful men feel safe, they often become careless. Whitcomb turned to Maya. "Miss Williams, you may begin with a brief statement." Maya stood slowly. Her wrist ached under the bandage. She kept both hands resting lightly on the table. "My name is Maya Williams," she said. "I operate a licensed coffee cart near the south side entrance of this courthouse. I am here because several small vendors on that block have reported being pressured for cash payments, threatened with permit action, and targeted with false violations after refusing or questioning those payments." Harlan gave a short laugh. Whitcomb looked over her glasses. "Sergeant Harlan, you will have your opportunity," Maya continued. "Many people were afraid to sign their names. I understand that fear. I have experienced it myself." Harlan leaned back and whispered something to Miller. Miller smirked. Whitcomb nodded. "Thank you. Sergeant Harlan, your response." Harlan stood, folder in hand. His voice changed the moment he addressed the room. It became smooth, professional, almost saddened. "Ma'am, this department respects every lawful business operating around the courthouse. But what we have here is not a civil rights matter. It is a compliance matter being dressed up as racial grievance." Maya kept her eyes on the table. Harlan opened the folder. "Miss Williams arrived recently and immediately began creating tension. We have reports of price gouging, obstruction of pedestrian flow, improper disposal of wastewater, sanitation concerns, and aggressive behavior toward officers performing routine checks." Luis shifted behind Maya. Rosa gripped his hand. Harlan lifted a page. Officer Miller observed her blocking accessible sidewalk space. Officer Dwyer documented disorderly conduct. Licensing has raised questions about the approved location of her cart. Environmental Services received a complaint about runoff. These are not rumors. These are records. Maya could feel Evelyn behind her, still as stone. Whitcomb looked toward Maya. "Miss Williams, you will be allowed to respond." Before Maya could speak, Deputy Chief Ellis rose slightly. "If I may." Hearing Officer Whitcomb, "Sergeant Harlan has served this county for 18 years. He has protected this courthouse through protests, threats, and high-risk proceedings. I would caution against allowing anonymous accusations to damage the reputation of a decorated officer." Whitcomb's face did not change. "Noted, Deputy Chief." "Sit down." Ellis sat, but his eyes hardened. Harlan continued, now warming to his own lie. "What concerns me most is that Miss Williams appears to have encouraged other vendors to distrust police. Some of those vendors are elderly, some are immigrants, some frankly do not understand county code. She has taken advantage of that confusion." A sound came from Evelyn's row, small but sharp. Maya did not turn. Harlan looked straight at Maya. "She is not a victim. She is the problem. She came here, stirred up resentment, and turned honest vendors against law enforcement. The room went very quiet. Maya stood again. May I respond? Whitcomb nodded. Maya turned slightly, just enough to face the hearing officer. Not Harlan. I did not encourage anyone to distrust police. I listened when people told me why they were already afraid. Harlan snorted. Convenient. Maya looked at him for the first time. Sergeant Harlan, did you demand $300 from me last Friday? His face went still. Whitcomb leaned forward. Harlan said, No. Maya nodded once, as if accepting the answer. Did you take money from my cash drawer? No. Did you threaten to have my cart towed if I could not pay? Harlan smiled again, but there was warning in it. Miss Williams seems confused about a routine enforcement discussion. Maya lowered her gaze. Maybe I am. That pleased him. She saw it immediately. He thought she was weakening. He stepped from behind his table, folder still in hand. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She makes wild claims, then hides behind tears. This is a courthouse, not a street corner performance. Whitcomb said, Sergeant, return to your table. But Harlan had begun to enjoy himself. He pointed at Maya. That woman is running a filthy cart outside a public building, overcharging people who don't know better, dumping God knows what into the street, and now she wants to cry racism because somebody finally told her no. Maya's breathing stayed even, though her pulse had changed. Behind her, Caleb whispered, Damn it. Harlan heard and turned. You got something to say, Brooks? Caleb froze. Whitcomb struck the desk lightly with her gavel. Sergeant Harlan, you will address this hearing, not the gallery. Harlan's jaw flexed. For 1 second, his polished mask cracked, and the man from the sidewalk looked through. Maya saw it. So did the recorder. Whitcomb looked at Maya. Miss Williams, do you have documentation to support your position? Maya placed one plain folder on the table. It contained only harmless copies. Enough to appear prepared, not enough to reveal the federal case. Yes, ma'am. I have copies of my permit, inspection approval, photographs of my cart placement, and records of payments made after threats. Harlan's eyes narrowed. Payments. The word touched something raw in him. Careful, he said. Whitcomb looked up. Excuse me? Harlan forced a smile. I said she should be careful with unsupported accusations. Maya sat down slowly. The hearing officer began reviewing the documents. The room settled into a brittle silence. Harlan stood near his table, but his eyes stayed on Maya, measuring her, revising her in his mind from frightened girl to possible threat. Maya kept her head lowered. That was the hardest part. Not the lies, not the public humiliation, not even the pain in her wrist. The hardest part was letting him believe she was alone, while every word he spoke wound itself tighter around his own throat. After 10 minutes, Whitcomb announced a short recess to review the submitted materials. The room began to stir. Maya reached for her folder. Harlan moved beside her before anyone else stood. His voice was low, meant only for her. You think you're smart. Maya did not look up. No, officer. You think this room protects you. No, officer. He leaned closer. When this hearing ends, that street is still mine. Maya's hand rested on the folder. Harlan smiled. And little girls who embarrass me don't get second chances. Maya finally looked at him. For just an instant, she let him see nothing. No fear, no tears, no apology. Only memory, only evidence, only the quiet patience of someone building a case. Harlan saw it, and his face darkened. The recess was over, but the real hearing had only just begun. The recess ended with a sound that seemed too small for the moment. Hearing Officer Whitcomb's gavel tapping once against the desk. Everyone returned to their seats, but the room did not return to order. Not truly. Something had shifted during those 10 minutes. The vendors sat closer together now, shoulders nearly touching, as if proximity could make courage travel from one body to another. Evelyn Carter held her purse against her chest with both hands. Luis Romero kept his cap in his lap, turning it slowly. Caleb Brooks stood near the aisle until Whitcomb looked at him, then sat down hard, jaw locked. Maya Williams took her place at the complainant table and laid her folder flat before her. Her wrist throbbed beneath the bandage. Her forearm ached where the oak tree had torn her skin, but the deepest pain in the room did not live in her body. It lived in the silence of the people behind her. In all the years they had been forced to swallow their own names. Whitcomb adjusted her glasses and looked down at the submitted documents. Miss Williams has provided copies of her vendor permit, health inspection approval, photographs of cart placement, and several written summaries of alleged retaliatory enforcement actions. Sergeant Harlan, before I ask follow-up questions, I want to clarify one matter. Did you, or did you not, have contact with Miss Williams regarding payment outside official county fees? Harlan stood slowly. His uniform still looked perfect. His face did not. No, ma'am, he said. I did not. Whitcomb looked over the file. Then, why would several vendor complaints describe weekly cash payments demanded by officers assigned to courthouse detail? Harlan laughed once, short and sharp. Because people lie when they don't want to follow rules. Maya kept her eyes on the table. Whitcomb turned a page. Several of these accounts predate Miss Williams's arrival. They got coached. By whom? Harlan pointed at Maya. By her. A soft rustle moved through the gallery. Maya looked up, not at Harlan, but at Whitcomb. I never coached anyone. Harlan's control cracked another inch. You expect us to believe that? You roll in here with your little coffee cart, start whispering to every vendor on the block, and suddenly these old complaints come alive? Maya's voice stayed quiet. Maybe they were always alive. Maybe nobody protected the people who wrote them. Harlan turned toward her fully. That was the answer he had been waiting for. Or maybe the answer he had been afraid of. You watch your mouth. Whitcomb's tone sharpened. Sergeant Harlan, you will not threaten a participant in this hearing. Harlan did not sit. His eyes stayed fixed on Maya. That woman has been poisoning this street since the day she rolled that filthy cart onto my sidewalk. Evelyn made a sound behind Maya. A wounded breath. Whitcomb struck the gavel. Sergeant. But Harlan was no around speaking to the hearing officer. He was speaking to the street, to the vendors, to the old order he felt slipping. She overcharges courthouse workers, blocks public access, dumps coffee waste, creates tension, and then hides behind being black when somebody calls her out. Maya felt the room tighten. Agent Reed's voice echoed in her memory, steady and stern. Let him show the court who he is. Don't interrupt evil when it starts confessing. Maya folded her hands in front of her. Sergeant Harlan, she said softly. Did you tell me I had to pay $300 every Friday? His jaw flexed. No. Did you take money from my cash drawer? No. Did you say paperwork means whatever you say it means? Harlan's eyes flashed. I said no such thing. Maya nodded, as if each denial were exactly what she expected. Did you threaten to burn Mr. Romero's truck if anyone helped me? Luis shut his eyes. Harlan stepped away from his table. You lying little? Sergeant, Whitcomb barked. Return to your table. He ignored her. Miller rose behind him, not to stop him, but as if the old habit of backing Harlan up had reached his legs before his brain could think. Dwyer remained seated, but his sunglasses were off now, his expression uncertain. Harlan came closer to Maya's table. You think because you got some old woman and a sandwich man scared enough to sit behind you, that makes you important? Maya looked up at him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. No, I think they were important before I got here. That did it. Harlan's face hardened into something ugly and familiar. The professional mask was gone. The street had entered the courtroom. You people always do this. He spat. You break rules, cry victim, then expect decent people to clean up your mess. A murmur passed through the room. Whitcomb stood. Sergeant Harlan, this hearing is in recess, pending security intervention. Harlan snapped toward her. Sit down. This is still my courthouse. The room froze. Even Ellis, seated behind him, went still. Maya saw the mistake land. Harlan had said aloud what he had believed for years. Whitcomb's face went pale with anger. This courthouse belongs to Benton County and the law, Sergeant. Not you. Harlan turned back to Maya. You should have paid and kept your mouth shut. Maya stood slowly, careful not to appear defiant. Is that why you took money from us? Harlan leaned over the table. I took what I was owed. Every breath in the room seemed to vanish. Maya's heart struck once against her ribs. She kept her voice fragile. And the fake violations? The sidewalk complaints? The health reports? His eyes were wide now, rage burning away caution. Paperwork says whatever I tell it to say. Evelyn began to cry. Caleb whispered, Jesus. Whitcomb reached for the phone on her desk, but Harlan moved first. He rounded the edge of the table and stepped into Maya's space. You don't get to stand here and question me, he said. Not you. Maya did not move. You wanted everybody looking? His voice dropped, thick with hatred. Fine. Let them look. Then, he slapped her. The sound cracked across room 2B. Maya's head turned with the force of it. Pain burst along her cheek. Her hand rose halfway, then stopped. She tasted blood at the corner of her mouth. Behind her, Evelyn cried out. Luis jumped to his feet. Caleb lunged one step forward. Harlan spun toward them. Sit down, he roared. Every last one of you. The old fear obeyed before courage could catch up. Luis froze. Caleb's fists shook. Evelyn covered her mouth with both hands. Maya turned back slowly. Her cheek burned. Her eyes watered. But she did not let the tears fall. She had spent years training for danger. But no training made humiliation painless. Somewhere, deep inside, a younger Maya wanted to strike back. The daughter of Marcus Williams wanted to scream. The agent knew better. Do not interrupt evil when it confesses. She wiped the blood from her lip with 2 fingers and looked at Harlan. Is that how you kept them quiet? Harlan stepped closer, breathing hard. People like you don't get to challenge men like me in my own courthouse. Maya heard the words not as an insult, but as a door opening. Your courthouse? She asked. His voice rose. My courthouse, my street, my rules. Those vendors stand there because I allow it. They pay because I allow them to stay. And if I say a coffee girl is a nuisance, a liar, or a criminal, then that is what the record says. For one long second, nobody moved. Not Whitcomb, not Ellis, not Miller, not the vendors. Maya lowered her eyes, letting him believe he had broken her. But inside her coat lining, the recorder had captured every word. Inside the walls of room 2B, the courthouse system had captured the slap, the confession, the threats, and the racial contempt. In the back row, the maintenance man who was not a maintenance man had one finger pressed to a hidden transmitter. Harlan reached for Maya's arm. That was when the double doors opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just wide enough for Agent Thomas Reed to step into the room with 3 FBI agents behind him. His voice was calm, clear, and federal. Sergeant Roy Harlan, he said. Step away from her. Harlan turned, still breathing hard, still flushed with the power he thought he owned. This is a county matter, he snapped. You have no authority here. Reed's eyes moved once to Maya's bleeding lip, then back to Harlan. Civil rights violations, extortion, witness intimidation, assault on a federal agent, he said. That makes it federal. For the first time since Maya had met him, Roy Harlan had nothing to say. And for the first time that morning, the vendors behind her began to lift their heads. For one suspended moment, room 2B did not understand what had just entered it. The people inside had known uniforms all their lives. Local uniforms, county uniforms, men with sidearms who leaned too close and spoke as if every sidewalk belonged to them. But the agents now standing in the doorway carried a different kind of stillness. They did not shout. They did not posture. They did not need to. Their presence moved through the room like a cold front. Agent Thomas Reed stepped forward first. He was 52, gray at the temples, wearing a dark suit and a badge clipped at his belt. 2 FBI agents moved to either side of the doors. A third stayed near the back row beside the man dressed as courthouse maintenance, who had now removed his cap and revealed the clear earpiece tucked behind his collar. Harlan stared at Reed as if refusing to recognize what his eyes were telling him. This is a county matter, Harlan said again, louder this time, trying to rebuild the authority that had begun cracking the moment Reed spoke. You don't walk into my hearing and interrupt official proceedings. Hearing Officer Whitcomb stood behind her desk, face tight with controlled fury. Sergeant Harlan, you will be silent. Harlan turned on her. You don't give me orders. Reed's voice cut through the room. Actually, right now, she does. And so do I. Officer Miller shifted behind Harlan, one hand hovering near his belt. One of the FBI agents looked at him once. "Don't," the agent said. Miller froze. Dwyer stayed seated, pale now, staring at the floor as if the wood grain had suddenly become very important. Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis had not moved at all. But Maya saw him, the way his fingers tightened around the armrest, the way his eyes flicked toward the side exit. Men like Ellis did not panic openly. They calculated, and in that instant, he was counting exits, witnesses, recordings, and every conversation he wished he had never had. Reed looked at Harlan. "Step away from Miss Williams." Harlan's eyes snapped back to Maya. His cheek twitched. "Miss Williams?" he said with a harsh laugh. "She's a coffee vendor who lied her way into this room." Maya stood with one hand on the table. Her cheek was burning where he had slapped her. Blood still touched the corner of her mouth. She could feel the vendors behind her watching, not with the helpless terror from the sidewalk, but with something fragile beginning to rise. Reed said, "Maya." That one word changed the air. Not Miss Williams, not coffee girl, not complainant. Maya. She reached into the inside seam of her gray coat and withdrew the leather credential holder she had carried hidden against her ribs since morning. Her fingers were steady now. The room seemed to lean toward her as she opened it. The badge caught the light first, then the identification. Special Agent Maya Williams, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. Evelyn Carter made a sound that was almost a sob. Luis Romero whispered something in Spanish under his breath. Caleb Brooks rose halfway from his seat, eyes wide, as if the whole world had tilted and finally placed one true thing upright. Harlan stared at the badge. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin gray beneath the red. "No," he said. Maya's voice was quiet, but every corner of the room heard it. "Yes." Harlan blinked, then looked at Reed, then back at Maya. "That's fake." Reed reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. Federal authorization, Joint Civil Rights Investigation, Department of Justice with FBI support. Operation Courthouse Shadow. The name landed in the room like a sealed door opening. Maya closed the badge holder but kept it visible in her hand. "I've been recording you since the first Friday. You told me to pay up or get lost." Harlan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Maya took one step toward him. Not enough to threaten, only enough to stand where he had forced her to shrink. "I recorded the money you demanded, the cash you took from my drawer, the permit you destroyed, the threat to burn Mr. Romero's truck and Miss Carter's pie stand, the baton strike, the false violations, your statement that paperwork says whatever you tell it to say." Evelyn pressed both hands to her mouth. Maya continued, and now her voice carried the weight of every anonymous letter hidden in that coffee can. "And just now, in this room, in front of witnesses, you admitted that vendors pay because you allow them to stay. Then you assaulted a federal agent during an active civil rights investigation." Harlan's eyes flashed with desperate anger. "You set me up." "No," Maya said. "You showed up exactly as yourself." Reed nodded to the agents. "Sergeant Roy Harlan, you are being detained pending federal charges, including extortion, witness intimidation, deprivation of rights under color of law, obstruction, and assault on a federal officer." Harlan stepped back. "You can't arrest me in this courthouse." Hearing, Officer Whitcomb's voice was cold. "Watch them." The agents moved. Miller finally made the mistake of reaching for his radio. One FBI agent took his wrist, turned him cleanly, and pinned him against the wall before the radio cleared his belt. Dwyer raised both hands without being asked. Two more agents entered and secured the side aisle. The gallery erupted in gasps, but no one ran. No one needed to. For once, danger was being pointed in the right direction. Harlan tried to twist away when Reed reached for him. "Get your hands off me," he snarled. "You have no idea who I know." Maya looked past him to Deputy Chief Ellis, who had gone rigid in his seat. "Oh," Reed said. "We have a very good idea." That was when Ellis stood. It was subtle. Too subtle for anyone who had not spent months learning the grammar of guilty men. One knee shifted. One hand slid toward his jacket. His body angled toward the side door. Maya saw it first. "Deputy Chief Ellis," she said. He stopped. Every eye turned to him. Reed did not look surprised. "Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis. Remain where you are." Ellis forced a thin smile. "Agent Reed, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. I came here in good faith to observe an administrative matter." From the back of the room, the maintenance man who was not maintenance lifted a tablet. "Agent Reed, we have confirmation." Ellis received an encrypted message from Harlan's phone at 8:31 yesterday morning and forwarded it to Daniel Price 4 minutes later. The name hit Maya like a pressure change. Daniel Price. The possible federal leak. The name on the case board. The man who had known too much too early. Reed's face hardened, but his voice stayed calm. "Thank you." Ellis said nothing now. Harlan looked at Ellis, and that look told Maya more than any confession. Betrayal. Fear. Recognition. The chain was visible. Reed turned back to Harlan. "Hands behind your back." For years, Roy Harlan had placed people in cuffs with a kind of bored contempt. Now, when the metal circled his own wrists, his face changed. Not because the cuffs hurt, because the room saw, the vendors saw, Luis saw, Caleb saw, Evelyn saw, the hearing officer saw. The same people he had made small watched him become ordinary. The click of the handcuffs was not loud, but it seemed to echo against every polished wooden surface in room 2B. Harlan twisted his head toward Maya. "You're dead. You hear me? You and every vendor on that street." Reed stepped closer. "Add retaliation threat to the record." The FBI technician in the back answered. "Captured." Maya did not flinch. She looked at Harlan with her swollen cheek, her bandaged wrist, her bloodied lip, and the badge still in her hand. "You thought nobody would speak because nobody signed their names," she said. "But fear is not silence. It is evidence waiting for protection." Harlan was pulled toward the doors. As he passed the gallery, Caleb stood fully. Luis rose beside him. Evelyn stood last, slower than the men, one hand braced on the bench, but when she was upright, she did not look away. Harlan saw them standing. That was the first punishment. The agents led him out into the hallway where courthouse workers had gathered in stunned silence. Miller followed in cuffs. Dwyer was escorted behind him. Ellis remained in the room under watch, his elegant suit suddenly looking like costume clothing after the show had ended. For a moment, Maya stayed where she was. Then Evelyn came to her and touched her face gently, just below the bruised cheek. "Baby," she whispered, tears bright in her eyes. "Who are you really?" Maya looked at the old woman, then at Luis, Caleb, Rosa, and the others who had lived too long under a man who mistook fear for consent. "I'm the person assigned to prove you were telling the truth," Maya said. Evelyn closed her eyes. And somewhere in the hallway, as Harlan shouted for lawyers, union reps, and friends who suddenly were not answering their phones, Agent Reed stepped back into room 2B carrying a sealed evidence case. "This isn't over," he said. Maya looked toward Deputy Chief Ellis. "No," she said. "Now we follow the money." Agent Reed did not present the evidence like a man seeking drama. He presented it like a man who knew drama had already done enough damage. Room 2B had been cleared of unnecessary people, but it was not empty. Hearing, Officer Whitcomb remained at her desk, silent and pale with anger. Evelyn Carter sat in the first row with Rosa Romero holding one of her hands. Luis stood behind them, cap pressed to his chest. Caleb Brooks leaned against the back wall, arms folded tight, eyes fixed on the door through which Harlan had been taken. Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis sat near the side table under the watch of 2 federal agents, his face arranged into calm, but his right foot tapped once, then stopped when Maya looked at it. Maya stood beside Agent Reed at the front of the room. Her cheek had begun to swell. A medic had offered to examine her, but she had asked for 5 minutes first. 5 minutes to let the people behind her hear what they had waited years to hear. Reed set a sealed evidence case on the table and opened it. Inside were labeled drives, printed transcripts, photographs, copies of citations, financial summaries, and the ruined pieces of Maya's first vendor permit sealed in a clear bag. The crushed laminate looked small under the fluorescent lights, almost pathetic, but Maya knew what it represented. That was how men like Harlan worked. They broke small things first, a paper, a morning's cash, a person's confidence. Then they waited to see who stayed quiet. Reed placed the first drive into a secure laptop connected to the room monitor. The screen flickered. There was Maya's coffee cart, filmed from the hidden camera inside the sugar canister. There was Harlan leaning over the counter, his hand on the metal edge, his mouth close to Maya's face. 300 every Friday. Cash. No receipt. No excuses. Evelyn shut her eyes. The video continued. Harlan breaking the permit. Maya bending down. Harlan's boot knocking her sideways into the oak tree. His baton lifting toward the vendors. Anybody moves, and I burn your damn carts to the ground. Luis inhaled sharply. Reed paused the video. This is from Friday morning. Device 1. Time-stamped. Geolocated. Uploaded automatically to a federal evidence server. Chain of custody intact. He played another file. The second visit. 4:57 p.m. Harlan's voice dropped, low, but clear. That's the beautiful thing about reports. They say what men like me need them to say. Hearing, Officer Whitcomb removed her glasses and set them down carefully, as if afraid she might break them. Reed turned to the vendors. Every threat you heard. Every word he said when he thought nobody important was listening. We have it. Caleb's voice came rough from the back. We were important. Maya looked at him. Yes, you were. Reed moved to the next folder. Anonymous complaints recovered from a storage room behind Miss Carter's pie stand. With consent. He glanced at Evelyn. She nodded once. These records span 4 years. We have identified at least 23 separate incidents involving cash demands, retaliatory citations, suspicious inspections, and intimidation of witnesses or potential complainants. Luis lowered himself slowly onto the bench, as if his knees had stopped trusting him. Reed held up a page. March 3. Vendor initials L, R, cash demand, followed by a health inspection and refrigerator violation the next morning. We subpoenaed service logs for that inspection unit. The refrigerator had been calibrated 2 days prior. No temperature fault existed. Luis covered his mouth with one hand. Another page. May 19. C. B. Cited for pedestrian obstruction. Payment recorded by Harlan as courtesy compliance. Citation later deleted from the county system. Caleb stared at the floor. Another. August 7. E. C. Short on a demanded payment due to prescription costs. Threat concerning her heart condition recorded in a handwritten complaint. Miss Carter, we will need a formal statement from you, but not today unless you choose. Evelyn's voice trembled. I'll give it. Rosa squeezed her hand. Reed nodded. Thank you, ma'am. Maya stepped forward then. She placed a separate folder on the table. These are the false reports filed against my coffee cart yesterday. Obstruction, price gouging, wastewater disposal, disorderly conduct, and questionable permit status. They were entered after Sergeant Harlan learned I would represent the anonymous complainants at this hearing. Whitcomb leaned forward. Can you prove timing? Maya opened the folder. Yes, ma'am. Metadata from the licensing entry shows the complaint was backdated. Environmental Services received an anonymous complaint from a public terminal inside the police annex. Security footage places Officer Dwyer at that terminal 4 minutes before the submission. Officer Miller's obstruction report describes the cart blocking wheelchair access at 8:10 a.m. But at 8:21 a.m., courthouse exterior video shows the cart positioned against the curb with 6 feet of clearance. Whitcomb's face hardened with every sentence. Maya continued. The disorderly conduct note claims I shouted at Sergeant Harlan during a routine compliance check. The hidden recording shows Sergeant Harlan destroyed my permit, kicked me into the oak tree, struck my cart with a baton, caused hot coffee to spill on me, removed all cash from my drawer, then threatened vendors with arson if they helped. For the first time, Deputy Chief Ellis spoke. This is highly irregular. These materials should go through counsel before being discussed in an administrative room. Reed did not look at him. Deputy Chief Ellis, you are not being asked to advise on procedure. Ellis's mouth tightened. Reed opened the next file. And now the room changed again. The earlier evidence had been about Harlan. This was about the machine around him. A chart appeared on the monitor. Phone calls, messages, cash deposits, citation dates, inspection schedules, and courthouse vendor locations. Reed pointed to the first line. Sergeant Harlan's phone communicated with Deputy Chief Ellis before or after 17 identified vendor contacts. In 12 of those incidents, a citation, inspection, or permit review followed within 48 hours. Ellis looked straight ahead. Maya watched the side of his face. He was good, not innocent, but good at appearing insulted rather than afraid. Reed continued. Bank records show repeated cash deposits by Harlan below reporting thresholds, small amounts, different branches, consistent with structured cash activity. We also identified deposits into accounts connected to Officer Miller and Officer Dwyer. Caleb muttered. They were all eating off us. Maya felt the sentence land across the room. Reed clicked again. A new name appeared on the chart. Special Agent Daniel Price. Maya's eyes stayed fixed on it. Reed's voice cooled. This is the federal leak. Special Agent Daniel Price had access to limited operational notes concerning the anonymous vendor complaints and the accelerated hearing. Yesterday morning, after the hearing update was entered, Price received an encrypted message from Deputy Chief Ellis. 4 minutes later, he accessed the case management system. Shortly after, Harlan began generating false complaints against Maya Williams. Whitcomb whispered, "My God," Reed added. Price was taken into federal custody 20 minutes ago at the Atlanta field office, while attempting to delete messages from a secondary phone. Evelyn looked at Maya. They had somebody on your side helping them? Maya nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. The betrayal sat heavily in the room. For people who had already struggled to trust any system, hearing that even the federal side had been compromised could have broken something. Reed seemed to understand that. That is why this case does not depend on trust alone, he said. It depends on evidence. He turned back to the screen and played the final clip from room 2B. Harlan's voice filled the space again. Uglier now because everyone knew exactly what it meant. My courthouse. My street. My rules. Then Maya's question. And the fake violations? The sidewalk complaints? The health reports? Then, Harlan's answer. Paperwork says whatever I tell it to say. Whitcomb closed her eyes for 1 second. When the clip ended, nobody spoke. Maya turned to the vendors. Every paper you saved mattered. Every date you wrote down mattered. Every time you thought nobody would believe you, you still left a record for the day someone could. Luis looked at the evidence table, then at Maya. So what happens now? Reed answered. Now federal charges are filed. Harlan, Miller, Dwyer, and Price are already in custody. Deputy Chief Ellis will be detained pending further questioning and likely indictment. Licensing and environmental services records will be seized. Every citation connected to courthouse vendors will be reviewed. Ellis stood suddenly. I will not be spoken about like a criminal in a public hearing. The agent beside him moved immediately. Reed looked at him at last. Deputy Chief Marvin Ellis, you are under federal detention for obstruction, conspiracy, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Ellis's face finally cracked. The agents took his arms. He did not fight like Harlan. Men like Ellis rarely did. They preferred signatures, quiet calls, and closed doors. But when the cuffs closed, the sound was the same. As Ellis was led out, Evelyn stood. Her voice was thin but clear. For years, she said, we thought nobody cared because nobody came. Maya looked at her, eyes softening. Evelyn continued, but maybe sometimes help comes quiet. Maybe it comes wearing an apron. A small, broken laugh moved through the room. Not joy, not yet, but relief, trying to remember how to sound. Maya touched the bruise on her cheek and looked at the evidence table, at the ruined permit, at the flash drives, at the papers that had once hidden in a coffee can. Harlan had believed fear could bury truth forever. But now, the truth was labeled, copied, time-stamped, and sitting under federal seal. By late afternoon, the story had already begun leaking through Benton County like water through cracked stone. First, it was a whisper in the courthouse hallway. Sergeant Harlan had been taken out in handcuffs. Then, a clerk texted her sister, whose husband worked at the county garage. A bailiff told a retired deputy over lunch at McAllister's diner. Someone outside room 2B had recorded 10 seconds of federal agents leading Harlan down the hall, red-faced and shouting, with his hands cuffed behind his back. By 3 o'clock, nearly every person within 5 blocks of the courthouse had heard some version of it, and none of the versions were quiet. But on the street where it had all started, quiet came first. Maya Williams returned to the south side entrance just before 4, escorted by Agent Reed and 2 FBI agents who stayed far enough back to let her walk on her own. Her cheek was swollen now, a dark bruise forming beneath the skin. A white bandage covered her wrist. Another strip of gauze lay beneath the sleeve on her forearm, where the oak tree had cut her. She moved carefully, but she moved upright. The vendors were waiting. Luis Romero stood beside his sandwich truck with his wife Rosa at his side. Caleb Brooks leaned against his shoeshine stand, arms crossed, his face still carrying disbelief. Evelyn Carter sat behind her pie table, one hand over her heart, the other gripping the edge of the table, as if she needed to feel something solid beneath her fingers. For years, when a police car passed that block, everyone looked down. Now 2 federal SUVs were parked along the curb, and nobody knew where to look. Maya stopped near the old oak tree. The pavement had been washed, but a faint brown stain from the spilled coffee still marked the concrete. The place where she had fallen looked smaller than she remembered. Pain always made places seem larger while it was happening. Evelyn rose slowly. "Baby," she said, voice trembling. "Are you all right?" Maya looked at the old woman's worried face and gave the only honest answer she could. "Not completely." Evelyn nodded, as if she respected that more than any lie. Luis removed his cap. "They got him. They got Harlan," Maya said. "Miller, Dwyer, Ellis, and the federal agent who was feeding them information." Caleb pushed away from the stand. "There was really somebody federal helping him?" Agent Reed answered from behind Maya. "Yes. Special Agent Daniel Price was arrested in Atlanta. He will not have access to this case again." Caleb let out a bitter breath. "Man, even the people supposed to save us got people selling us out." Reed stepped closer, not defensive, not offended. "That is true. And it is also true that the evidence you saved helped expose him." Caleb looked away, but his shoulders loosened slightly. A small crowd had begun gathering near the courthouse steps. Clerks, attorneys, reporters who had heard enough to come sniffing, and ordinary citizens who had business inside but now found something larger outside. No one pushed too close. The presence of federal agents kept curiosity polite. Maya turned toward the vendors. This afternoon, federal warrants were executed at the police annex, the licensing office, and environmental services. Records are being seized. Every citation tied to this block will be reviewed. Anyone who paid money to Harlan or his officers will have a chance to make a protected statement. Luis's eyes filled. "Protected how?" Reed said. "Witness intimidation charges are already being prepared. Anyone who threatens you now adds years to their own case. We also have temporary protective orders available through the court." Evelyn looked toward the courthouse, then back at Reed. "Funny thing, needing protection from the people who were supposed to protect us." Reed accepted the rebuke with a small nod. "Yes, ma'am." For a moment, the old street lived between what it had been and what it might become. Cars passed. The courthouse flag moved in a low wind. Somewhere a church bell rang 4 times. Then a black federal transport van turned the corner from the rear courthouse exit. The crowd shifted. Inside the van, through the barred side window, Maya saw Roy Harlan. He was no longer in his perfect dress uniform. His badge had been removed. His collar was open. His face was flushed, jaw clenched, eyes wild with the fury of a man who had mistaken temporary power for permanent ownership. When the van slowed near the curb to allow another vehicle to pass, he saw the vendors standing together. He saw Luis. He saw Caleb. He saw Evelyn. Then he saw Maya. For a second, all the old hatred returned to his face. He leaned toward the window and shouted something no one outside could hear clearly through the glass. But the meaning was obvious. Threats had always been his first language. Caleb took one step forward. Maya put out a hand, not to stop him with fear, but with calm. "No," she said. "Let him look." So they did. Luis stood with his cap in his hand. Rosa held his arm. Caleb lifted his chin. Evelyn, small and elderly beneath her gray cardigan, did not sit down. Her hand trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on Harlan through the van window. The transport moved again. Harlan disappeared down the street he had ruled for years. Nobody cheered. That mattered to Maya. Cheering would have made it feel like a game, like victory belonged to the loudest person. But this was not victory yet. This was the first clean breath after being held underwater too long. Agent Reed came to stand beside her. "You should go to the hospital." Maya almost smiled. "You keep saying that, and you keep ignoring it. I'll go." "When?" She looked at the vendors. "After this." Reed followed her gaze. "There is no script for this part." "No," Maya said. "There never is." A reporter moved closer, microphone in hand. "Agent Williams, can you comment on the arrests today?" Maya looked at the microphone, then at Evelyn, Luis, and Caleb. She knew how a story could be stolen in the first sentence. She knew how cameras loved badges and bruises more than slow suffering. If she spoke as the hero, the people behind her would become background. That would be another kind of theft. She turned slightly toward the vendors. This investigation began because small business owners around this courthouse kept records when nobody believed them, Maya said. They wrote dates. They saved citations. They protected one another's names when fear made public testimony impossible. Today's arrests happened because their truth survived long enough to be protected. The reporter turned immediately toward Evelyn. "Ma'am, were you one of the complainants?" Evelyn looked frightened for half a heartbeat. Then Luis placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Caleb stepped closer on the other side. Evelyn lifted her chin. "I sold pie on this corner 25 years, she said. "I paid when I was told to pay. I cried when I got home. Then one day, I got tired of crying into flour." The reporter lowered the microphone slightly, moved by the plainness of it. Evelyn continued. "We were not brave all at once. We were brave in little pieces. A letter here, a copy there, a name left off because we still wanted to wake up safe. But those pieces counted." Maya felt her throat tighten. Luis spoke next. "He took food money from families. He made honest people feel like criminals," Caleb added. "And he made us think nobody would care unless one of us died." The words settled heavily. Reed signaled to the agents to keep the press at a respectful distance. The vendors had given enough for one day. As the crowd began to thin, Maya walked to her damaged coffee cart. The cash drawer had been removed as evidence. The permit clip was empty. One wheel squeaked from where the baton strike had jarred the frame. She ran her hand along the metal edge. Evelyn came beside her. "You coming back tomorrow?" the old woman asked. Maya shook her head. "Not as a coffee vendor." Evelyn looked at the cart. "Shame. Your coffee was too strong, but your muffins were decent." Maya laughed softly, then winced because her cheek hurt. Evelyn reached into a pie box and pulled out a wrapped slice of apple pie. "Take this, before that tall federal man drags you to a doctor." Maya accepted it. "Thank you, Miss Evelyn." "No," Evelyn said. "Thank you for letting him show himself." Maya looked toward the courthouse doors. He was always showing himself. People just kept looking away. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Well, not today." That evening, as the sun lowered behind the courthouse roof, federal agents carried boxes of seized records out of county offices. The police annex parking lot filled with unmarked cars. Phones rang unanswered in offices where men were suddenly calling lawyers. The local news ran Harlan's image beside the words, "Federal Civil Rights Investigation." For the first time in years, the vendors on the south side of Benton County Courthouse closed their stands without counting cash for a man who had no right to it. Maya finally let Reed drive her to the hospital after dark. As they pulled away, she looked back at the old oak tree, the courthouse steps, the pie table, the sandwich truck, the shoe shine stand, and the strip of sidewalk where fear had cracked open in public. Harlan had lost his badge that day, but the street had gained something heavier. It had gained the knowledge that a powerful man could fall while the people he once terrified were still standing. The case moved from whispers to headlines before the week was over. By Monday morning, every television in McAllister's diner carried the same image. Sergeant Roy Harlan, once the most feared man on the courthouse block, being led through a federal building in handcuffs. His face was turned away from the cameras, but everyone in Benton County knew the slope of his shoulders, the hard line of his jaw, the uniform that was no longer on his body. Beneath the footage, the caption read, "Former Benton County Sergeant, charged in federal civil rights and extortion case." People who had once lowered their voices when Harlan entered a room now said his name aloud over eggs, toast, black coffee, and morning pills. Retired men in feed caps shook their heads at the counter. Church ladies in their Sunday jackets, still wearing perfume from morning service, talked softly about how long the vendors had suffered. Some people claimed they had always suspected him. Others said nothing, because guilt has a way of making a mouth dry. Maya Williams watched none of it from the diner. She watched from a conference room at the federal building in Atlanta, a paper cup of coffee cooling untouched beside her. Her cheek had faded from purple to yellow. The burn on her wrist had begun to peel. Her body was healing in visible ways, which made the invisible parts easier for others to overlook. Agent Thomas Reed sat across from her, reviewing the indictment with two federal prosecutors. On the table lay a clean copy of United States v. Roy Michael Harlan, Marvin Ellis, Grant Miller, Sean Dwyer, and Daniel Price. The words looked almost too neat for what they contained. Extortion under color of official right. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Witness intimidation. Obstruction of justice. Conspiracy. Assault on a federal officer. False documentation. Retaliatory enforcement. Bribery and unlawful disclosure of protected investigative information. Maya read the charges twice. Then, she closed the folder. Reed looked at her. "You all right?" "No," she said. He nodded, as if that was the answer he trusted most. The trial began 4 months later in federal court, not in Benton County. The courthouse in Atlanta was larger, colder, harder to sentimentalize. Its marble floors swallowed footsteps. Its elevators carried lawyers, reporters, witnesses, and families upward in silence. Outside, news vans lined the curb. Inside, security checked bags, belts, phones, and the patience of everyone who entered. Maya arrived early on the first day, dressed in a dark suit, her badge no longer hidden. She stood near the witness room window and watched the city move below her. Atlanta had always felt different from Benton County. Bigger, faster, less polite about its wounds. But that morning, even the city seemed to hold still. Evelyn Carter arrived with Rosa Romero on one arm and Caleb Brooks on the other. Evelyn wore the same pearl dove pin she had worn to the hearing, this time pinned to a navy dress. Luis came behind them, carrying a folder thick with receipts, old citations, and photographs of his sandwich truck. Caleb wore a suit that did not quite fit, but he stood like a man, determined to grow into it. When Maya saw them, something in her chest loosened. Evelyn touched Maya's cheek gently, just as she had done in room 2B. "You eating enough?" Maya almost laughed. "That's what you're asking me today?" That's what old women ask when the world is burning. Somebody's still gotta eat. Luis nodded toward the courtroom doors. "He in there?" "Yes," Maya said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Good." The courtroom filled slowly. Reporters took the back rows. Harlan's union attorney sat with a stack of folders and an expression of wounded outrage. Marvin Ellis wore a tailored suit and stared straight ahead. Miller looked smaller without his uniform. Dwyer looked scared. Daniel Price sat apart from the others. Federal issue suit, federal shame. Eyes lowered. Of all of them, Harlan looked the angriest. He had lost weight, but not the old contempt. It lived in his face like a tenant refusing eviction. The prosecution opened with the video. No speech could have done it better. On the screen, Harlan stood at Maya's cart beneath the morning sun. "Pay up or get lost, black woman." The words filled the courtroom. No one coughed. No one shifted. Even the jurors seemed to absorb the sentence before they understood the evidence around it. Then came the demand for $300, the broken permit, the kick into the oak tree, the threat to burn the carts, the baton strike. Maya on the pavement, Harlan emptying her cash drawer while she begged for the money she had earned. Maya sat still while it played. She had watched it dozens of times by then, but seeing it in front of strangers reopened something. Not because of the pain, because of the silence around it. The video showed what bystanders had not stopped, what vendors had been too terrified to stop, what Harlan had believed he could do in broad daylight and call normal. The prosecutor let the screen go black before speaking. "This case is about power," she said. "Not the power to enforce the law, but the power to twist the law into a weapon against people who could not afford to fight back." Over the next days, the government built the case, piece by piece. Luis testified first among the vendors. He told the jury about cash payments folded into napkins, about inspections that arrived the morning after he was short, about meat he had to throw away because a false violation kept his refrigerator sealed for 6 hours. His voice shook when he spoke of his wife and grandchildren. "I paid because I was ashamed," he said. "Then I paid because I was afraid. After a while, I could not tell the difference." Caleb testified about being cited for loitering at his own stand, about being shoved against the courthouse wall in front of customers, about learning to look down when Harlan passed. The defense asked why he had not reported it sooner. Caleb looked at the jury. "Because reporting a wolf to the wolves don't save the sheep." Evelyn testified on the 4th day. She walked to the stand slowly, one hand on the rail, but once seated, her voice carried. She told them about 25 years selling pie, about payments taken from grocery money, about Harlan threatening her oven, her heart, her family. She did not exaggerate. She did not cry until the prosecutor showed the anonymous complaint in her handwriting. "Why didn't you sign your name, Mrs. Carter?" the prosecutor asked. Evelyn wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Because I wanted to be brave, but I also wanted to live long enough to see my grandchildren graduate." The jury listened. Maya testified last. The defense tried to paint her as a federal plant who had provoked Harlan, a young agent hungry for a career-making case. They asked why she had not arrested him after the first payment, why she had allowed vendors to remain afraid, why she had let herself be struck in room 2B. Maya answered carefully, "Because one act of cruelty can be denied. A pattern cannot. Because the people on that street had been hurt where no one could see. That day, I needed the court to see." The prosecutor then played the room 2B recording. "My courthouse, my street, my rules. Paperwork says whatever I tell it to say. People like you don't get to challenge men like me." The courtroom heard Harlan convict himself in his own voice. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. When they returned, Maya sat behind the prosecutors with Evelyn on one side and Reed on the other. Harlan stood facing the clerk. His hands gripped the table. "Guilty, guilty, 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 guilty." The word came again and again, until it stopped sounding like a verdict and started sounding like a door locking. At sentencing, the judge spoke of public trust, racial intimidation, organized corruption, and the particular evil of using law as a disguise for theft. Harlan stared forward, jaw tight, showing no remorse. Ellis received decades. Miller, Dwyer, and Price received long federal sentences. Roy Michael Harlan was sentenced to life in federal prison. No one cheered. Evelyn bowed her head. Luis crossed himself. Caleb wiped his eyes angrily, as if tears had betrayed him. Maya looked at Harlan one last time as deputies led him away. He did not look powerful now. He looked like a man finally measured by something he could not threaten, bribe, burn, or falsify. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Reed guided the witnesses through the crowd, but Evelyn stopped at the top of the steps and turned to Maya. "Justice came," Evelyn said. Maya looked at the city, at the cameras, at the people who had paid too much for that sentence to be true. "Yes," she said, "but it came carrying a lot of bruises," and as the courthouse doors closed behind them, Maya understood that a verdict could end a case, but it could not return the years fear had already taken. 3 weeks after the sentencing, the south side of Benton County Courthouse sounded different, not louder. Exactly. The street had not become a parade ground. People still moved with the habits life had taught them. Older men still checked traffic twice before crossing. Court clerks still hurried with folders pressed to their chests. Mothers still held children's hands too tightly on the way into hearings. Vendors still counted change carefully, because justice did not pay rent, and courage did not lower grocery prices. But the silence was different. It no longer belonged to Harlan. Maya Williams returned on a bright Thursday morning, wearing a charcoal coat and walking shoes instead of heels. Her badge was inside her pocket, not hidden, just not needed. The bruising on her face had faded completely. The burn on her wrist had left a faint mark she sometimes touched without thinking. Agent Reed had told her scars were the body's paperwork. Maya had told him that was the kind of thing only a man who hated poetry would say. She arrived just after 8, when the courthouse block was fully awake. Luis Romero's sandwich truck was open again, the smell of grilled onions and peppers drifting into the cold air. A new inspection certificate was taped proudly to his window, clean and untouched. Caleb Brooks sat at his shoeshine stand, working polish into a pair of old brown shoes, while a retired teacher read the newspaper above him. Evelyn Carter's pie table stood beneath a striped awning, apple pies cooling beside sweet potato and pecan, the crusts golden and imperfect in the way homemade things should be. Maya paused near the old oak tree. The scrape on its bark was still there, the place where her shoulder had struck the trunk when Harlan kicked her. Someone had washed the pavement long ago, but Maya could still see the morning if she let herself. The broken permit, the hot coffee, the empty cash drawer, Evelyn's frightened eyes, Caleb half rising, Luis trapped between fear and decency. For a moment, she heard Harlan's voice again. Pay up, or get lost, black woman. Then a warmer voice called out, don't you stand over there looking haunted, baby. Come get some pie. Maya turned. Evelyn Carter was watching her with one hand on her hip, looking smaller than the courage she carried. She wore her pearl dove pin again, this time on a red cardigan. Maya crossed the sidewalk and accepted the foil-wrapped slice Evelyn offered. You keep feeding federal agents like this, Miss Evelyn. Somebody's going to open an investigation into bribery. Evelyn smiled. Honey, if pie is a crime, half the church ladies in Georgia are going to prison. Luis leaned out of his truck window. Coffee, Agent Williams? Maya raised an eyebrow. You selling coffee now? No. I bought some from the new cart. He pointed down the block. Maya followed his gesture and saw it. A small blue coffee cart parked near the courthouse side entrance, run by a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and a Boston accent strong enough to cut through traffic. A line had already formed. Caleb looked up from the shoes he was polishing. Hers ain't as strong as yours. My coffee was not that strong, Maya said. Evelyn, Luis, and Caleb all looked at her. Maya sighed. Fine. It was strong. Strong enough to wake the dead and make them apologize, Evelyn said. For the first time in weeks, Maya laughed without pain. The ceremony began at 9. It was not official in the way county events like to be official. No ribbon stretched across the sidewalk. No politician stood at a podium pretending he had always cared. The vendors had refused that. This was theirs. A few folding chairs were set near the oak tree. Someone from Luis's church brought a small speaker. Caleb's aunt brought flowers. Rosa Romero handed out paper cups of coffee. Evelyn brought pie because Evelyn believed grief, relief, and public memory all went better with something sweet. At the base of the oak tree stood a bronze plaque fixed to a low stone marker. Maya had not seen the final wording until that morning. For every small voice that was forced to whisper, and for the day whispers became testimony. Maya read it once, then again. No names were carved beneath it. That had been Evelyn's idea. Names matter, she had said. But this ain't about making a list. This is about remembering that people had to hide their names in the first place. Agent Reed arrived just before the short dedication began. He wore his usual dark suit, but no tie, which for Reed seemed almost rebellious. He stood beside Maya near the back, hands folded in front of him. You doing okay? He asked. No, he nodded. Better answer than fine. Maya looked at the plaque. I keep thinking about my father. I know. He never got a day like this. No plaque, no crowd. Just a letter saying the city regretted the error. Reed was quiet. Maya continued. I used to think justice meant somebody finally saying you were right. But that's not enough, is it? No, Reed said. It is not. Evelyn stepped forward then, leaning lightly on Caleb's arm. The small crowd settled. She did not use the microphone at first. She simply looked at the courthouse, then at the street, then at the people who had once kept their eyes down when Harlan passed. "I sold pie here 25 years, she began. "Some days I sold more fear than pie, though I didn't know how to say that at the time." A few people lowered their heads. Evelyn held a folded tissue in one hand but did not use it. "We paid money we needed. We swallowed words we should have said. We wrote letters without names because we wanted truth, but we wanted to live too. Some folks might call that cowardice. I call it being human under pressure." Maya felt her throat tighten. Evelyn turned slightly toward her. "Then this young woman came here pretending to sell coffee. Her coffee was terrible strong, but her listening was good." Soft laughter moved through the crowd. "She did not give us courage," Evelyn said. "Don't let anybody tell it that way. We already had courage. It was just tired. What she gave us was protection long enough for courage to stand up straight." Maya looked down. Luis spoke next. He thanked the community, his family, and the people who had saved receipts when saving receipts felt useless. Caleb spoke only one sentence, but it stayed in the air longer than some speeches. "A man with a badge taught me to lower my eyes," he said. "This street taught me to lift them again." When the ceremony ended, people lingered. Older women hugged Maya and told her to eat more. A retired veteran shook her hand with both of his. A young mother whose son's complaint against an officer had once been threatened whispered, "Thank you," then walked away, before crying in public. Maya accepted every word carefully, knowing gratitude could become a weight if a person wore it wrong. Later, when the crowd thinned, Maya stood alone before the plaque. She took the slice of apple pie Evelyn had given her and placed it on the stone for a moment, not as an offering to the dead, but as a promise to the living. Then she removed from her pocket a small folded copy of her father's apology letter. She had carried it since the trial. Marcus Williams had never stood on this street. He had never met Evelyn, Luis, or Caleb. But his story had walked with Maya into every room where Harlan thought power would protect him. Maya unfolded the letter, read the first line, then folded it again. Reed approached, but stopped a respectful distance away. "You ready?" he asked. Maya looked at the courthouse doors, then at the new coffee cart, the sandwich truck, the pie table, the shoeshine stand, the oak tree, and the plaque beneath it. Almost. Across the street, a Benton County patrol car rolled slowly past. For one old second, the vendors stiffened. Luis's hand paused over a sandwich wrapper. Caleb's brush stopped moving. Evelyn's eyes followed the cruiser. Then the patrol car kept going. No one lowered their head. Maya saw it happen. Not a miracle. Not healing complete and tied with a ribbon. Just one small refusal to bow. That was enough for the morning. She turned to Reed. "Justice held?" Reed looked at her. This time, Maya nodded. This time, as they walked away from the courthouse block, the new coffee cart hissed behind them, milk steaming, cups tapping, customers murmuring in line. The sound was ordinary, almost too ordinary for everything that had happened there. But Maya knew ordinary could be sacred after fear. A woman selling coffee, a man making sandwiches, an old woman boxing pies, a young man shining shoes, people working, greeting one another, counting change, standing on a sidewalk without asking permission from a bully with a badge. At the corner, Maya looked back once. The flag above Benton County Courthouse moved in the wind. The words "equal justice under law" remained carved in stone, unchanged and imperfect. For years, those words had watched people suffer outside the door. Now, at least on this block, they had been forced to mean something. Maya touched the faint scar on her wrist and thought of her father, of Harlan's voice, of the coffee can full of anonymous complaints, of Evelyn's trembling hands, of Caleb lifting his eyes, of Luis saying somebody did hear us. Justice was not always fair. Sometimes it arrived late, bruised, and carrying the names of people who were too afraid to speak. But it had arrived, and behind her, on the south side of the courthouse, the street kept breathing. The lesson of this story is that justice does not always begin with a loud voice. Sometimes it begins with quiet people saving receipts, writing down dates, protecting one another, and refusing to let fear erase the truth. Maya's courage reminds us that power without accountability becomes cruelty, and silence can allow injustice to grow. But when ordinary people stand together, even in small ways, their whispers can become testimony, their pain can become evidence, and the truth can finally bring down those who believed they were untouchable. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, I would truly love to hear your thoughts on the storytelling, the emotional pacing, or whatever stayed with you after listening. Every comment you share helps make the next stories more honest, moving, and meaningful. And if you have a powerful or meaningful story of your own, please do not hesitate to send it to the channel. It may become the next story to touch and inspire thousands of others. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.